Welcome back to SlashBack Cinema, podcast that wades waist deep into the best horror of the 70s and 80s. I'm Shawnee.
And I'm Ryan. This week we're diving into not one, but two creature features from the muck. Wes Craven's Swamp Thing from 1982, and its campy comic book sequel, The Return of the Swamp Thing from 1989, this one by Jim Wynorski.
It's Suit versus Slime, Adrienne Barbeau, and Heather Locklear.
So does Swamp Thing deserve to be preserved in the bog classic of 1980s horror? That's what we're here to find out today.
Oh, so had you ever seen these movies before?
No, shockingly enough, because I was a huge Swamp Thing fan growing up, like that comic book captured my imagination in a huge way. And I don't know. Like, I feel like actually the first Swamp Thing, I think, was it rated R? I don't know. It definitely was like not on the to see list. And then somehow I just missed Return of the Swamp Thing as being even something to watch. How about you?
Yeah, I've definitely seen the first one. I had kind of forgotten that I saw it. It was rated PG, so it wasn't super. I mean,
Oh,
if they,
it was 80s PG though, which involved some breasts.
That's true. Yeah, I am surprised actually that they didn't do PG-13. I don't think PG-13 existed in 1982 when this movie came out.
Yeah.
But what I had forgotten until I started watching the original Swamp Thing from 82, I totally forgotten Wes Craven directed it. This is like before he became Wes Craven, like before he was kind of known for Nightmare on Elm Street. The other thing is, this ran on HBO over and over and over again. So I hadn't realized that there are certain sequences that are just burned into my little 12-year-old brain. It is not, I want to make clear, the sequence of Adrienne Barbeau bathing in the swamp, which I thought, really? I mean, we'll come back to that, but it is quite an eye roller, like a totally unnecessary sequence just goes on and on. But the things that stuck in my head were, well, you know what, maybe I should save it. So
Yeah.
we could talk about it as we get to the episode. Overall, as I was watching the movie, certain scenes came back to me of, oh yeah, I do remember this sequence or this actor, and I had totally forgotten about it. I never saw Return of the Swamp Thing until this week.
Yeah, and maybe for those that are sort of scratching your head as to why we're even talking about these movies, because we were debating, are these even horror movies?
Mm.
We just had come out of recording Chopping Mall and started digging into the catalog of that director, Jim Wynorski. And I had watched the trailer for Return of the Swamp Thing, and I was like, oh my God, this is that sweet spot of campy 80s horror
Yes.
film. Well, even if you want to call it horror. And then we kicked around the idea of, well, why don't we do a double header and compare and contrast it to Wes Craven's vision of Swamp Thing. And what's kind of really interesting about these two movies is they carry over some of the same cast members. So the guy that played Swamp Thing, was his name Dirk or
Yeah, Dick Durock or something.
Oh yeah, and then the actor that played Arcane, they reprised their roles. He actually went on to play Swamp Thing in the TV series that came out years later. So there's interesting continuity between these two movies. Although the take between what Wes Craven does and what Jim Wynorski does with the material is quite different.
Yeah, so first I want to just acknowledge the fact that listeners are getting their money's worth this episode because we're going to talk about both the 1982 Swamp Thing and the 1989 Swamp Thing in one shot. So you're getting a double feature today.
Absolutely. We're doing it all for you, our fans. You really demanded that we do this Who Were Better scenario that we're about to kick into here.
Last couple episodes we did, I think, were recommended by fans. This one, I think you just saw that Return of the Swamp Thing trailer and we're like, we got to do this.
I went totally off script.
Yeah.
You know, if listeners hate this conversation and these two films, yeah, you can blame it on me. Yeah.
Oh, no, I have no doubt that this one, we haven't even recorded it yet, but I'm positive it'll be one of our classic episodes. So let's start with Swamp Thing 82. Okay. I feel like this movie you could summarize in like 2 sentences. It's like, without going into the whole plot, like what's the basic summary of Swamp Thing?
Yeah, so this definitely digs into the original comic book material. It follows the scientist Alec Holland and his team of researchers that are set in the swamps, and they're doing research into this new plant life and experimentation. And he winds up stumbling upon this formula that winds up actually transforming him into this creature, the Swamp Thing. And so it's sort of Swamp Thing versus Arcane, who's trying to steal for his own gain, personal gain, which is immortality.
Right. And then Adrienne Barbeau works into it as the love interest. She plays this character, Alice Cable. And I mean, she basically exists in the movie to be rescued. She is the classic damsel in distress throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, definitely that 1950s creature from the Black Lagoon kind of trope, even down to the outfit she's wearing and the
Yeah.
way Swamp Thing carries her out of the swamp.
Swamp Thing, he's well there's a couple other monsters that show up, but in this case the monster's actually the good guy who saves the day and rescues our damsel.
I think that that was one of the things that always drew me to Swamp Thing. He was sort of this hero anti-hero kind of character that similar to the Hulk in some ways in terms of transformation, although his manifestation is less destructive and more of
Yeah.
a kind of a protector, kind of link to nature type of hero.
And he's like super strong and he can't be killed because he can't really, well, you can kill a plant. I've seen it happen in my very own home, but you can't kill Swamp Thing because he just like regenerates. And he can also like I had to look into this because I hadn't remembered the comic that well, but he can like control nature and control plants. So he has interesting powers, and it's kind of like got this body horror vibe. I feel like I never saw the Swamp Thing, that TV show that starred the same actor, Dick Durek. Did you watch it?
No, I never saw that. And then they did a reboot in 2019, which I'd be interested to watch. It definitely is a much darker, kind of seems to lean into the horror
Yeah.
aspect of the swamp and the Swamp Thing.
Yeah, both the original 82 movie and the return in 89 made me actually want to watch like a better version of a contemporary Swamp Thing movie. I just thought with modern effects, I feel like back in the 80s there was a lot of anxiety. We'll actually come back to this with the quiz even. A lot of Hollywood producers did not think of superheroes as like serious story content ideas. And so Swamp Thing, if you're not familiar with it, is just like this ridiculous guy who morphs into a vegetable or into a swamp creature. But in fact, it's got this cool body horror and he's got really unusual powers. And I feel like you and I could go way too deeply into this. But Alan Moore, who wrote that original Swamp Thing run, he like single-handedly kind of brings in this entire dark tone into comics. He's the guy that wrote Watchmen. And after Swamp Thing, a whole bunch of British writers like Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman come in and start writing these
Frank
great
Miller,
horror.
too.
Yes, Frank
Although
Miller.
was he British? I'm not sure. Yeah.
No, he's American. But yeah, but he's part of this this age of comic books that where you and I really got excited about comics, where they were much more adult and darker and took on more kind of the characters like Daredevil and Batman were all kind of like brooding and suffering and that's where I couldn't believe that Return of the Swamp Thing came out 1 month before the Batman movie from 1989. They don't even seem like they were made in the same decade.
Yeah.
We could talk about these one at a time. Did you like have favorite scenes or what was your reaction to watching the 82 Swamp Thing?
Yeah, yes. That's a great point that you made about the tone of superhero movies and superhero material being a little bit goofy, like they were not played seriously. So Wes Craven's take on Swamp Thing was definitely more serious and heavy. Although I say serious when we'll talk about special effects here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is hard to take a guy wearing a rubber suit that really looks like a rubber suit that's kind of hanging off of his face, and it
Yeah.
sort of looks like Gumby. You could see it like in the way he would move. It would like kind of like get the creases like the Gumby character.
Yes.
Like
It wasn't even like a scuba suit that's real body tight. Yeah, when he would move his arms, you could see like the rubber folds or yeah, it really they could not get away from how crappy the suit looked.
So that was definitely a limitation on how seriously you could take the transformation from Holland as a human to Swamp Thing in this movie. But I feel like they were pretty true to the comic. My favorite scene in that movie, which it got really interesting, I thought at this point, is after Arcane has captured Swamp Thing and he's put him in the basement. He's chained him up, and then he holds this dinner. Like inexplicably, the movie cuts to this scene where it's this fancy gathering with all these characters you've never seen in this very Victorian-looking house. There's exotic dancers there, belly dancers. Women are taking off their clothes. The whole thing is like it's got this different vibe, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Arcane chimes his glass and he wants to toast to their success with the experiment, and everybody's like, oh, that's great, when are we going to see the results? And then one of his main henchmen, he's like, oh, we're going to see it right now in the transformation of this guy. And the guy's like, don't, and he proceeds to transform into this, he's a very large man, he transforms into this little tiny pig creature, and he's like, oh no, you shouldn't have done that to me, Arcane, or whatever. Like, it was
Yes.
just so weird. It had like the Island of Dr. Moreau vibes. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good catch. Yes, absolutely. That sequence of that dinner might have been the first moment that I remembered that I had seen this movie before because it's really horrifying. Wes Craven does such a masterful job of making the weirdness of it and then the creepiness grow. They all drink wine and he doesn't know, you don't know that it's been poisoned. And so Bruno like asks, like, when are we going to find out? And then it's revealed, oh, you've taken it. We're about to find out what happens to you. And then he kind of falls under the table and you have no idea what's going to happen. And this little person kind of jumps out who's kind of like deformed. It's so weird and creepy that sequence definitely stood out to me as I immediately remembered it and remembered the actor that plays Bruno, how he starts to like act like he's like being poisoned and kind of shaking and choking. It was really genuinely creepy. So I agree with you. I hadn't thought about that being my favorite scene, but it really is the best sequence in the movie.
The other scene that's close on the heels of that, which links back to a lot of the comics, when something's in the basement in that dungeon and he's like pinned to that kind of, it's not a cross, it's like this X thing.
Yeah.
And he's reaching for the light. Like, that felt very evocative of the original source material from the comics. And then Cable's trying to encourage him to reach for the light. He regrows his severed arm. Like, that whole last act of the movie I thought was much better than the rest of the film.
So
It got
interesting.
really interesting.
Yes, that sequence was the only other sequence I remember having watched the movie. It's so crazy. This must be why we do this podcast. But yes, he had one arm chopped off earlier in the movie, and when he reaches up his hand and touches the light, his new fingers start to grow out of the stump and then extend, and it looks really cool. It is kind of this like body horror transformation. The pace of it like kind of builds, and you're not quite sure what's going to happen. Those two sequences, I must have seen them when I was 13, 14 years old. And immediately I remembered both of them as soon as I started seeing them. They were really well done.
Did you have favorite scenes?
Definitely those two scenes were the best. If there's one more sequence that I just want to tip my hat to, it is in the first act of the movie, the stuntman who has to be set on fire.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yes. If you are listening to this and you've only lived in a world of CGI, they set this dude on fire. It felt like for 60 seconds. And he not only had to be on fire, he had to act. He had to run up out of the room, then jump down the stairs, then run through the swamp, then jump into the water. And the flames off this guy were like 8 feet high. He was completely covered with so much flame. When he would run, little fires would be starting where his feet were. All of that was a real human being on fire. It's so interesting. It's shocking to see that now. Like, there are no movies in which they would put a person on fire like that.
Well, I noticed that too, and I was worried about that guy. I'm like, holy crap, is this guy still alive? Like, he was on fire for like 5 minutes.
Yes, yes, and the way they put him out in the movie is he just jumps into water. So in most movies, they show the guy on fire, and then they say cut, and then guys run and spray him with water. This guy seems like he had to put himself out 200 feet away from where they were setting him on fire. It was wild to see that scene. And how intense it was. And boy, that impressed the hell out of me. It was really quite an effect. I'm reminded of the fact that they don't give Academy Awards to stunt people. And stunt people have been pointing out now for years how crazy that is. These people like literally are putting their lives on the line for our amusement. So those three sequences were the ones that really stood out to me. At the same time, holy cow, this movie had a lot of problems. Because you talked about that cool sequence in the third act where Bruno transforms, but then the main villain, Anton Arcane,
yes,
he transforms.
Oh
And
my God.
good grief, that costume that he's in, it could have been a 1950s Japanese Godzilla movie. It looked so terrible and so cheap. It looked like they rented the costume. It just was unbelievably awful.
Unbelievably bad. And the transformation, you're watching it like, wow, this is really bad. And then there's one part where you don't quite realize, or I didn't realize at first, that it was sort of like the cocoon for his transformation. I was like, this is the character. He's in a bag and he can't like talk right. He's like, and it sounds like he's in a bag. And then it splits open and you're like, oh, this is going to be a great reveal. And then you're like, what? Like the eyes don't even move. The head doesn't, like there's nothing animate, like no animatronics. Like,
clearly, Robert, the script called for Arcane monster and then the Swamp Thing monster to fight in the swamp, which was like knee-high water. So these poor actors in kind of thick rubber costumes, they could barely move. They're stumbling around. Like when you see them try to run through the water, it looks like guys really struggling.
Yes, it does. Yeah. In other parts of the film, there's a lot of actors and actresses running through the swamp, and
Yeah.
you can just tell they look exhausted. They're like trying to
Yes.
run away from each other, and like the swamp was definitely having an impact on cast and crew of this one.
Right. And so the movie is really hampered by the budget. I mean, I felt like Wes Craven deserves credit. He swings hard to try to make like an actual serious comic book movie. And this is 82, so it's right around the time that the Superman movies came out. Superman with the
Right.
first Christopher Reeve was 78 and the second one was 1980, and then this Swamp Thing movie came out in 82. So Wes Craven is like really trying to take this comic book seriously. But with his budget of a couple of $1 million, there's only so much he can do. And the actors are fine. I kind of like the idea. The plot is almost like a King Kong plot of like this creature with a heart of gold who falls for this beautiful woman. But this is the other problem I had with this movie, and maybe part of this has to do with the period of time that it was made. The character that Adrienne Barbeau plays, the whole movie just gets captured and then saved by Swamp Thing. It happens like 3 times in a row. And so it makes the movie feel like hardly anything happens because they just keep repeating. They grabbed her, she's captured. Swamp Thing releases her. They grab her, she's captured. And then again, it goes, it just keeps happening.
Yeah.
And so it feels like a movie without much plot. You mentioned the Incredible Hulk, the TV show. And I had that exact same thought. There's a lot of sequences where the way they show Swamp Thing's super strength is he just throws a guy. And so they show him grab a guy, and then the camera cuts, and then a guy's like on a trampoline who just
They could see like the cable like pulling him backwards. You're like,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's like flying through the air.
Yeah, so it's a lot of that Incredible Hulk TV show stunt work of a guy just leaping over a table or a guy, leaping into the water. And that just happened again and again and again because they just didn't have the ability to do much more than that. So I felt like this movie, I wouldn't say it was a successful movie in my opinion, but I really like wanted to honor the attempt. Like I really felt like Wes Craven had twice the budget and time to make it. I really think he could have done something better. But holy cow, the monster limitations, the suit limitations. I thought the acting was good, and the storyline was a little lame. And then I mentioned earlier, there's this random sequence where Adrienne Barbeau is bathing topless in the swamp. Suddenly the swamp is like completely clear of muck, and it's like a beautiful lake. And she is just standing there topless, and it feels like it goes on forever for no purpose at all, other than you get to stare at a woman's breast. It really felt totally unnecessary and pointless. And Swamp Thing is looking at her from a distance, which makes him seem a little creepier. Good God, that sequence was uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah. Apparently that was done for an international release, and for the US release it was supposed to be cut. They had screwed something up and did the release with that topless scene in it, and they wound up going back and recutting it, re-releasing it because it wasn't in our contract to have that in the American market, which it's just so strange.
Yeah.
And not that we're here to talk about naked women, but what's really interesting is the Wes Craven version was much more salacious. There was a lot more nudity. And as we were moving in to watch Return of the Swamp Thing, I was sort of expecting more of that from Jim Wynorski, who we talked a little bit about some of his later films in life where it was like Shark Babes and the Bear Wench Project, really bad B movies that are kind of exploiting women. However, Return to the Swamp Thing, it's super clean, very wholesome. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about Return of the Swamp Thing, which in 80s timeline was 7 years later. So we're going from 82 to 89, which I will say early 80s to end of 80s, that was a huge kind of shift in what films looked like, what they sounded like. So that kind of sets the stage for Return of the Swamp Thing, which they took a completely different spin and take on this material.
Yeah, and so this movie I knew nothing about. And in '89 when it came out, ironically, Ryan, I don't know if you thought about this, but this is right around the time when you and I met in high school and became friends. I feel like '88, '89 is when we met on the high school yearbook and became friends.
Yeah.
And then Batman was a huge movie. They came out a month later, but this movie, I had no interest in seeing it. I think because, like we talked about earlier, the comic book Swamp Thing was so well written and such a good horror comic, and comic fans would point to it as like this is what could be done with this medium. Return of the Swamp Thing was like so cheesy, and it had much more of the tone of, like you said, that Batman '60s TV show.
Right.
And then when a month later, when Tim Burton's Batman comes out, that's when comic book fans are like, "Yes, this is what we always wanted."
Right.
Like a superhero movie that took the concept seriously. And so Return of the Swamp Thing, boy, I felt like it was the wrong time, wrong place. Like that was not the movie we wanted in 1989 as comic book fans.
Yeah, totally. We both were huge fans of what Alan Moore had done with
Mm.
Swamp Thing and transformed it into this kind of deep, dark. With Alan Moore's version, it wasn't even a man transformed into this thing. It was a plant basically embodied or held Holland's consciousness. So it was like
Yeah.
very deep and heady and
Hmm.
much, much more, I think, interesting and resonant with who we were at that time.
Yeah.
Now, as a 50-plus-year-old man, I go back to this and I'm like, wow, this movie was fucking fun. Like,
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, it's goofy. And yeah,
so
that's really
goofy.
funny. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is I felt like we're watching it now after what 30 years of comic book movies, all taken at the height of seriousness, especially in the DC universe, they just get darker and darker and darker.
Heavy, heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so this movie, it's part of the reason why I like Guardians of the Galaxy movies so much is because, especially the first one, because there's just a lot more lightness in them. And this movie is just so silly and so goofy. Seeing this after decades of these intense superhero movies, it was pretty refreshing to go back to that kind of campy Batman 60s TV show Batman. Like I feel like, well, now there's actually some space for this.
Yeah. And we had watched I keep wanting to say Murder Bots, but Chopping Mall.
Yeah.
And one of the things you had commented on that film was like how that movie felt just so 80s. The characters and like everything about it. There was a lot of that in this movie too. The bad guys had the A-team enemy vibe.
Yeah, that's
You had
right.
Heather Locklear in this, who
Yeah.
she won a Razzie for like worst performance award, but I really liked how she played
Yeah.
the character in this movie. Like the super villains, but they're like kind of like goofy Batman villains. Like it was definitely a throwback to that 60s comic book era and
Yeah.
a lot of fun. Yeah.
I mean, Heather Locklear, obviously she's famous as a model, but I felt like she understood what movie she was in. Like, she is the tone she's taking is purposefully this kind of tongue-in-cheek, goofy tone, and that's what the movie called for. And so, yeah, I don't think she was bad as an actress in this movie. I like the fact that she is not as much of a damsel in distress. Like she actually goes after the villain. And can we talk about this plot? We didn't summarize the movie, although, good Lord, this plot. This is not guy turns into Swamp Thing, saves damsel, the end. How do you summarize Return of the Swamp Thing?
It picks up with the same kind of setting, and we've got similar characters. This time we're introduced to Abigail Arcane, who is the stepdaughter of Arcane, and she's trying to find out what happened to her mom. So she goes down to the swamp to talk to Anton Arcane and confront him about what happened to my mom. Actually, this was a bit of a plot gap that it took me a while to be like, wait, didn't he die in the first movie? But
Yeah.
apparently he's been restored and resurrected by Dr. Lana Zarel,
Hmm.
who brings him back to life and is keeping him alive. So she's trying to develop along with Arcane this formula to heal him, bring back immortality. And you find that he's got actually truly an Island of Dr. Moreau situation going
Hmm.
on with all these weird mutated experiment monsters in his basement.
Hmm.
And then it's Abby's battle along with Swamp Thing against the evil Dr. Arcane.
Yeah, it's a little more convoluted of a plot. Like it's not clear. Like so, the villain Anton Arcane played by exactly the same actor in exactly the same way. So that does really throw you off. It's like if you watch his movies back to back, you literally saw him get killed in the first movie, and you don't see him get resurrected in the second movie.
No.
They just say,
He's
"No,
back."
you've been resurrected." In which case, then what's the problem? Like, then isn't he going to be immortal? Like, but the movie kind of explains, oh, well, he's getting older, and so he wants to be more youthful looking. And so, all right, whatever. So that's his goal, and so he's just like torturing people. The Island of Dr. Moreau thing is a perfect comparison. He's just like got these experiments going where he's kind of like the Bruno scene on crack. He's just giving this drug to one person after another, and then when it doesn't work out, he just sticks them into this machine that just toasts them like a crematorium for monsters, and then he just burns them up and then does more experiments. So he's got this lab full of like these people who are like half elephant or half cockroach or whatever, these super gross things. And that was fun. I thought there was some creativity there, and his evilness kind of comes out a little more. Do you want to talk about some things we liked about this movie? So first, I absolutely love the opening sequence of this movie. It opens with the same kind of font and the same swamp lettering, but it shows a bunch of images from the Alan Moore era Swamp Thing comic. Some great art by like some of these amazing artists that we knew at the time. I immediately liked that opening. It might have been one of my favorite parts of the movie because
It was
they
great.
picked very cool art. It took me back 40 years and I was like, oh my God, that great Bernie Wrightson stuff. It was amazing. And then I remembered like all these great Alan Moore stories. So boy, you get the impression it's going to like take this material more seriously. Ironically, the 1982 Swamp Thing takes it more seriously, I think. I also want to give props to the costume. We talked about the
Yes.
costume in the first movie. The costume in the second movie is way better
It's way better. Yeah.
and looks more swampy.
It's got those little details that you remember
Yeah,
from the comic book, like little tubers growing off of him, like
yes.
little things coming up off his shoulder into his head and leaves. Like it definitely looks like wetter and way more organic and real.
Right, right. It moves better. The actor who's acting in it can kind of communicate
Yeah, much
emotion,
more
I think, a little
expressive.
easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I love those things. I maybe my favorite sequence, this is a weird one, but I really like the sequence where Swamp Thing at one point is blown up by a grenade and he's like completely blown to smithereens. And so you just see like little tiny bits floating around in the water. And then over time, it takes like 20 minutes in the movie. As the story continues, he slowly begins to piece himself back together. And so a scene I really liked was that tub scene where green goo comes out of the tub and then he slowly kind of reforms himself. That struck me as I don't remember if that was in the comic, but it could have been. It was very cool, kind of science fiction-y, weird body
Yeah.
horror
It's
thing
cool.
about the recreation of a plant essentially.
V-
Um,
Very 80s special effects too. It was like the bad like glittering
yeah,
green effect to show
yes.
that he was going down the drain, coming back up into the tub. Like
Yeah, there's this power that Swamp Thing has in both movies where he can basically bring other people back from the dead. But the special effect is literally like an animated green glow. Like he just touches his swampy hand to your face. And
swamp
then
hands.
and then they kind of like just animate on top of that with this weird green glow of look, the power is happening. It doesn't look great, but that's what we had in the 80s, people.
That's right. That's
It's the
right.
best we could do.
Yep.
What do you got?
Those are both great. On my list, I had two. The first one was that monster fight in the lab. So it's Swamp Thing's down there, and then it's one of these Island of Dr. Moreau creatures that
Yeah.
we're talking about, and he was sort of like this. He had this very bulbous head. He had like the
That was
big,
yeah,
like
Thordak.
Martian looking 1950s monster head, and the battle between those two, it was just cracking up because it's just two guys in rubber suits fighting, and it's
Yeah.
set in this like very 80s low budget lab. And in some movies they'll pretend to take a swing or a hit at somebody, and then that's like implying that there's this fight happening. No, the Swamp Thing was full on punching this rubber suit guy in the head, and his whole head was like bouncing around like a ball, like a beach ball, getting smushed in a very rubbery way. Like it was
Yes.
so intentionally terrible. I was dying.
Yes, I did have a problem with it. It kind of took me out of it a little bit the way the rubber head would just kind of shake. It's clearly because the guy's head is a normal size head, but then they have put this beach ball on top of his shoulders, so the top of it is just wiggling.
So
Yes,
bad.
yeah, it was really, really cheesy looking.
I prefer a hunk of cheese.
And so they put all the costume money went into the Swamp Thing costume. I don't think they had much left for some of those guys.
No, no. So that was a pure campy 80s fun right there.
Yes.
I also really had fun with the two kid characters in this movie that like took me back to
Okay.
Like
This is going to be controversial then.
Goonies,
Mhm.
like it just had like 80s goofiness with these two kids, and they have
Mhm.
this friendship where they're just, I guess they hang out in the swamp here. Anyway, there's a scene where like the parents have left, and basically the one kid's like pulling out all of his dad's adult magazines, and they're going through it, and then they think their parents are back, so they're trying to hide the magazines, and then it's one of the monsters. And so throughout the movie, these kids are like showing up, and again, it's bad. It's kind of cheesy, the dialogue and kind of the interact. And then at the end, they're trying to capture a picture of Swamp Thing to win $10,000.
Yes.
Just like again, comic relief, silliness. But sounds like you had a different take on this one.
I liked the kid in the 82 movie much more. The 82 character, the boy, his name was Omar, it looks like. He had some funny lines, but he also seemed to exist in a real world. I found the two kids in Return of the Swamp Thing so freaking annoying. Holy shit. Their voices were annoying. Their acting was insane.
I
I
loved it.
felt like the director just fed them a steady diet of um, what was it? Little Rascals, and just said,
Totally.
watch 100 hours of Little Rascals, and then do your impression of that. So I agree with you. I do think they were going for some kind of like Goonies thing, but I mean, this director is no Steven Spielberg. He's not getting, I think, the best performances, and these kids were so, their voices were annoying. And their reactions to they were like in a cartoon. I felt like they were not quite in the same movie as everyone else was in a movie that's a little bit tongue in cheek. If they were cut out of the movie, I actually think it would have been a better movie, completely better, if there had been no scenes with these two kids because they were useless. God, it's so dumb and irritating. So
Omi! Omi! Omi, we gotta stop. Omi, I gotta stop.
You ain't hungry again, are you?
5 minutes, that's all I ask.
Last 5 minutes turned into a half an hour. We gotta move.
We've been moving all day.
Well, we ain't gonna make no $10,000 while you sit around feeding your face.
How do you know the National Spectator's gonna pay 10 bills for any stupid picture?
Hell, man, I saw where they paid a dude from Spokane 2 times that for a picture of Bigfoot.
Yeah, but Bigfoot's more famous than this guy.
Just come on, okay?
Little Rascals. That's a great comparison. One other scene, I don't know that it was the best executed scene, but I love that they included it, was there's this kind of hallucinogenic love scene between Swamp Thing
yes.
and Abby, which is actually straight from the comic book material that Alan Moore developed. And for those that aren't familiar with any of it, basically there's this love between Swamp Thing and Abby in the comic and in the movie also, but because they're two different species, the way that they wind up coming together, Swamp Thing offers a tuber off his body to Abby, and she proceeds to take a bite of it. You think they're just making out and making love, but then she wakes up to be like, did that happen? And he's like, only if you wanted it to.
Yeah, it's kind of like you don't know if she's hallucinated it or if it really happened. I did chuckle at the line where Abby is kind of hitting on him.
Is there a Mrs. Swamp Thing?
No, I'm a bachelor.
So what do? Order in?
It's been a long time since I've left.
Well, I seem to have that effect on most of my boyfriends.
Me? Your boyfriend?
Why not?
You said it yourself. I'm a plant.
That's okay. I'm a vegetarian.
That did make me laugh. That was a little kinky and weird.
There were so many funny one-liners. Like, that was funny. There was a scene where like there's Arcane's main henchman, this guy Gunn. They're trying to shoot him down, and he screams out, "Turn him into guacamole!"
Yes, I read he ad-libbed that line.
So funny. Why don't we shift gears and we could do ratings on each? We could just do our favorite, however we want to do it. Like I think we keep this format pretty loose.
So the original Swamp Thing, I'll give a rating for each. And these were both really tough to give a rating to. The original Swamp Thing honored the idea of what the movie was trying to do, but also thought it didn't look great. My notes say I'm getting major The Incredible Hulk vibes. The fights weren't good. The costumes weren't good. I thought the storyline was a little boring. We talked about the stuff that we liked about it. So for Stabby, I just gave it a 2. And I just went back and forth between 2 and 2.5. I think Wes Craven gave it a shot, but it's not really good. I don't think it holds up. Return of the Swamp Thing, though, I did think was funnier, but those kids were so freaking annoying to me that so if I'm giving Swamp Thing a 2, I'll give Return of the Swamp Thing a 2.5. I do think it's a better movie just overall. The Swamp Thing costume is so much better. That helps. And I think the acting is fine. And I'm fine with it being a more tongue-in-cheek movie. But I find those kids just annoyed the shit out of me the whole movie. And again, the monsters are not great looking and the plot's a little bit all over the place. So 2 and 2.5. I was a little disappointed. I wanted to like it more than I ended up liking it. But so I'm very interested. What did you give it?
Okay. I'm right there with you on the original Swamp Thing. So Swamp Thing by Wes Craven, 2 stars. Like everything you just said. Like I really did love those 2 scenes that we talked about. Like if there was more of that in that movie, I feel like it would have been a much different film. For Return of the Swamp Thing, could have just been where I'm at. I'm a huge fan of Swamp Thing. It's definitely in my DNA all these years later. I feel like surprisingly, Jim Wynorski took it to a place that it didn't sync up with the comic book, but watching it now, I loved it. Like it was so much fun. I thought it was really funny. I thought those kids were funny. I could see why you would think they're annoying. The cheesy 1950s like rubber suit monster battles, which I loved growing up as a kid. So I feel like he pulled all these levers from my childhood and the stuff I loved over the years that it's going to influence my rating of 4 stabbies.
4 stabbies. Wow. Bold. That is a bold take.
It's a bold take. And I know it's a bold take, but I just had so much fun watching this movie. It's what the doctor ordered in that moment. You know, maybe the doctor was Dr. Arcane and he dosed me with some weird chemical shit. And I'm going to turn into a plant after recording this podcast, but I thought it was great.
Yeah. I mean, I gave it a 2.5, but I was like 2.5, 3. I went back and forth. I'd go as high as 3 on Return of the Swamp Thing because the things that took it down for me just distracted me too much and irritated me too much.
Yeah, and I do think that comparing these 2 together helped push that rating higher. Had this been on its own, it might have been a little bit different. But you know, go bold or go home, as you say.
Right. Return of the Swamp Thing, even though we talked about the fact that it's got more of a 60s Batman vibe, it's also more of a horror movie. I thought the concept of what Arcane is doing in that basement with people, they were really grotesque. I mean, they weren't very realistic looking monsters, but the idea of what he was doing and the people with antennas coming out of their faces or tusks growing out of the side of their head, they were really kind of gross. So there was more of that, which I actually thought, like, I wish the movie would have leaned into Arcane as a psychopath. I thought that was pretty cool. And Heather Locklear, give it up. I do not think she deserved a Razzie. If she ever hears this, we're fans.
Heather, we're fans. I had a big crush on her as a kid, and I thought she was really enjoyable in this movie and played her part well.
Okay, let's get to the quiz.
Trivia time.
Shall we play a game?
I'm excited about this one. I had the best time writing these questions because I was really into all the things I'm going to ask you about, and I don't know if you will remember them or like them as much as I did. Both of us talked about how watching the original Swamp Thing and some of the special effects look so much like the Incredible Hulk TV show. All of my questions today are about Marvel and DC superhero TV shows that were on in the 70s and 80s.
All right.
All right. So let's see how you do. This first one may be a little hard. Again, this is totally going to depend on whether or not you've seen any of these.
I feel like you're trying to get in my head and set me up for failure. I'm going to crush this, man. I'm ready.
Oh, good. I hope you do. I hope you do well. Question number 1. So the Incredible Hulk TV show, I'm sure you remember it well, ran from 78 to 82. The show was very popular, but when it was canceled, NBC in 1988 released a 2-hour Hulk TV movie special called The Incredible Hulk Returns, which also did really well. So here's my question. In The Incredible Hulk Returns, the Incredible Hulk fights and then partners with which Avenger? And here's your 4 options. A, Thor, B, Ant-Man, C, Captain America, or D, Iron Man. Which of those 4 does the Incredible Hulk partner with in the Incredible Hulk TV movie, The Incredible Hulk Returns?
Oh, damn. All right, go through it one more time.
All right, your options are A, Thor, B, Ant-Man, C, Captain America, or D, Iron Man.
I'm going to scratch Iron Man because like I feel like that was such a troublesome character for Marvel to pull off. I'm going to go Captain America.
Then your options are Thor, Ant-Man, Captain America. You're going with Captain America?
Yeah.
All right, the actual answer is Thor.
Ah,
So we have to put these links into the show notes. They are so insane and terrible. I feel like this is what made it hard to be a comic book fan at this time.
because it's so bad.
The enemy retreats with nary a blow struck. We will win the day, Banner. Do not fear, Odin is with us.
So he teamed up with Thor. That was question number one. I got one more Hulk one for you. On the Incredible Hulk TV show, which we've been talking about, Bill Bixby travels to a new town every episode. And my question is, why does he do that? A, because Banner is searching for a scientist rumored to have a cure for his affliction. B, because Banner is investigating the death of his wife. C, because the Hulk is wanted for a crime he didn't commit. Or D, to keep production costs low so it didn't add new sets.
God damn it, Johnny. Yeah, you're definitely are steamrolling me with these.
Okay.
And the last one we're just gonna rule out. But his
keep
wife
production
did I feel like get killed. So there's something there. He definitely was accused of a crime he did not commit. And I do feel like he was looking for something to cure himself. So like you're like touching on threads of things that actually were part of this show.
But let me just say, as a hint, this was a show that was on American television in the 1980s.
Yes. I don't know
Based on that.
I don't know if that helps me.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna go with the crime that he didn't commit.
Yeah, every single character on the A-Team were wanted for a crime they didn't commit.
Yes.
All of television was just people wanted for a crime they didn't commit. What's funny about that is if you go back and listen to the Hulk, there's this voiceover narration
Right at the beginning. I remember it. Yeah.
And it says, wanted for a crime he didn't commit.
Yeah,
That just made me laugh. I don't have any recollection of what this supposed crime was. And when I Googled it, I had a hard time finding the crime. All right, but here's one, Ryan. We're going to go to number 3.
Does this involve the actual crime of the Hulk?
We're going to move on.
Oh, thank God.
Ready? We're done with the Hulk.
All right.
So we've got different superhero shows from the 80s. So do you remember Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends? One of the great cartoons?
Yes.
Ran from 81 to 86. My question for you, who were Spider-Man's 2 amazing friends that appeared with him every episode? A, Doctor Strange and Iron Man. B, Firestar and Iceman. C, Captain America and Daredevil. Or D, The Incredible Hulk and Aunt May. And by the way, Aunt May was an amazing friend. So don't you dare say she wasn't.
She was family, though, so she kind of has to be his friend. All right. Hey, one more time through the list.
All right. Who are Spider-Man's amazing friends? In the show, Spider-Man has amazing friends. Is it Doctor Strange and Iron Man? Is it Firestar and Iceman? Is it Captain America and Daredevil? Or is it the Hulk and Aunt May?
God damn it. Had you asked me about the Wonder Twin powers and what their powers were, form of an ice bucket.
Right.
I'm going to go A.
A, Doctor Strange and Iron Man?
Yes.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends, Iceman and Firestar.
It was actually Firestar and Iceman.
Damn.
And
I'm really letting our fans down here. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought these questions were pretty tough. And I'm very curious if our fans get these, because you really had to have been pretty conscious in the late 70s, early 80s to have a memory of these things. But they were fun to revisit. All right, question number 4. Let's see how you do with this one. In the late 1970s and early 80s, CBS tried out many Marvel superhero TV shows, some of which were popular, like we talked about, some of which were canceled after the pilot. So I'm going to list 4 live-action Marvel superhero shows that DC aired in the 70s and 80s. One of them I just made up. The other 3 were actual shows that were on CBS in the late 70s, early 80s. You ready?
Okay. Yep.
A, Captain America. B, Doctor Strange. C, Spider-Man. D, Wolverine. Which one is not an actual live-action show that CBS showed played in the 70s and 80s, early 80s?
Wolverine.
Wolverine is correct.
Oh, thank God.
Well done, sir. What made you didn't even talk through it. Did you just know it?
A couple of those sounded like there was something that I remembered about them, but Wolverine, I don't think he ever came onto the screen before this next phase of the Marvel Universe coming to the big screen.
Last question, number 5. Wonder Woman is famously from an island known as Themyscira. I did not require you to remember that.
Thank God. Thank you.
This is really going to tap into our 80s nerddom. Prior to the 1980s, Of course, Ryan, you know I'm referring to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Prior to 1987's Crisis, in the DC universe, the island Wonder Woman was from was known by a different name in the comic and on the Linda Carter TV show. So the question is, what was the name of the island Wonder Woman was from before it was changed to Themyscira? Here are your options. A, Harmony Cove. B, Sappho's Utopia. C, Paradise Island. Or D, Amazonia.
It's either C or D.
Paradise Island or Amazonia?
Yes.
You want to flip a coin?
I feel like written by a bunch of chauvinist male pigs back in the day. It might be Paradise Island.
I'm just going to end your pain.
Okay.
Yes. Amazon. It was actually hard to come up with 4 other options or 3 other options for Paradise Island. That question I put in there for Kim, my wife. She is listening to this podcast right now, yelling Paradise Island. She's been saying it since before I read any of the 4 options. She'll remember that. She loves Linda Carter.
Thank God. Yeah. Well,
so you got 3 out of 5, Ryan. That is not something to be ashamed of. You knew that the Hulk was wanted for a crime he didn't commit. You knew there was no Wolverine TV show, and you correctly guessed Paradise Island, although Amazonia almost got you.
Almost got me, yeah.
So 3 out of 5 is nothing to be ashamed of. That wraps up another trip down memory lane. Hopefully you enjoyed revisiting Swamp Thing and Return of Swamp Thing as much as we did.
Don't forget to follow us on our socials and subscribe however you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you do love the show, leave us a review. It helps other people find out about the podcast.
And we want to hear from you. If you have a favorite memory from the 70s or 80s, we've taken lots of suggestions from people. And you know, Ryan, if people go into our show notes to check out some of those links, the show notes are actually where you can also see the link to drop us a few bucks or check out our merch store at slashbackcinema.com. So thanks for tuning in to Slashback Cinema. See you next week. Ha, I took your line.
You bastard. All right, see you next week. Bye. And slashbackcinema.com. If you... Why can I not read this? I should just rewrite this. Every week I can't read this. All right.
Yeah, and check out... Wait, did you just read my part?
No.
Oh.
No. I did not.